a famous story about a fellow that was driving in Manhattan, New York, early in the morning, searching for a spot, for parking spot. I assume you know, you go to Manhattan, even you are 7 in the morning, there are certain spots that already occupied earlier. And there are places over there that for a half an hour they charge you $18 or more, right? So he was circulating around that area. He started praying, oh God, listen, I got to find this parking spot. I have an appointment. It's crucial. Nothing happens. So he said, God, if you find me a spot, I promise that I'll give tzedakah. God, I promise that I'll go every day to shul and daven. Oh, I found a spot. Forget it, God. It's okay. I'm fine. Right? That's the Yetzer Hara, right? That some people, you know, they make all kind of commitments, and then when it's a real follow-up, when I was a rabbi in New Jersey, one of the rabbinic meeting, the rabbi complained they are in New York, I don't want to mention where, in the synagogue they selling opening for the Kol Nidre night and opening for the Mincha and Mafti Yona. So they competing over that. And then all of a sudden, when Yom Kippur is over, the shamosim, the people who are in charge, goes to this guy, and one of them said he was mad, someone did something to him or said something to him, but you commit yourself to such a large amount of money, and the funny part is not the first time. So can you impose on him? It's a famous response from my teacher. One of my teachers, his name is Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He was a Rosh Yeshiva and great scholar in Israel. So they asked him a question about Gemarrah. Gemarrah is the Hebrew free loan. People in the community who have a need, they go and they borrow. You need to marry your child, you need to have an unexpected medical expense. So you borrow and it's free. But the problem is you commit yourself to a certain day. So is the Gemarrah allowed to go ahead and push you and said, you know, they start putting you under pressure that you pass the due days and you don't pay it back, right? Is that okay, not okay? We will talk later about that response of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. One of the great Torah scholars, his name is Rabbi Baruch Ber. He said, one of his famous statements, he said, I have 2 wishes for my world to come. One, I want a stander. Anybody knows, how do you say stander in English? What?
Book stand or
book stand. Podium. So I want the podium. And the second, I want the Tractate Nedarim. He says that's the tractate he find the most fascinating. So what do we learn? You take a cup. You have a handler on a cup, and you have the cup. So if you hold the handler, you're holding the cup, but you don't hold the cup itself. You hold the handler, right? That's called yad. Yadot Nedarim. So if you said half of the statement, you said, I'm going to my friend's house and they're talking too much and takes too long. I'm not going there. But you use the word meruchakani mimcha. I'm distant from you. You didn't say it clearly, specifically, what exactly involved. You just said, I'm in a distance from you. So that's basically a language, it's called Yadot Nedarim. It's partially a Neder. And we learned yesterday, we juxtapose Neder to Nazir, to Nazirite, which means the same way the Torah said, Bal Yachel Dvaro, which means you cannot change your commitment, you make a commitment the same way it applies in a neder, making a serious vow. The same applies to nazir, to someone who commit himself to be Nazirite, not to drink wine, not to touch the corpse, etc. The same applies in Bal Te'acher. We learn about making a vow that, for example, you commit yourself to give a sacrificial offering to the temple. Now it's a festival, for example, of Shavuot. So you have to finish the year cycle, and the year began in Passover. So you have X amount of months. It's about what? 10 months about cycle. The moment it passed Passover, you're already in violation of you shall not delay. That the same way it's applied for the neder, applies also for Nazirite. A person said, I will not, I'll be a Nazirite. And he ate grape or he drank wine. So in addition to a punishment for you should not change your word, you also have the idea of you should not delay it. So if someone said, that's what we finished yesterday, I will not pass away, I'll not die until I'll be a Nazirite, which means someone commit himself before he's passing to be a Nazirite. So since you don't know when it happens, you have to do it right away. So here we are on page 4, Tractate Nedarim, page 4, the top of the page. Rav Acha bar Yaakov amar, כגון דנדר, דבח said דנזר, והוא בבית הקברות. So the Ran and Tosfot tells us that imagine a fellow, he is standing in a cemetery, and he said, I committed myself to be Nazirite. So here is the idea. If he is standing there and is not leaving immediately the cemetery, he is in a violation of thou shall not delay, because it has to be right away. Now, one of the prohibition of Nazir is not contaminated, not to be attached with the corpse. Since he is in a cemetery, is the commitment. Now, those days that applies to Nazirite, so those days that he is in a state of impurity, it's not counting as those days of Nazirite. So therefore, he needs to recount again the days of Nazirite. The Mishnah in Tractate Nazir, page 54b, dealing with all the specification, when, where, and how. Now, the idea, if he committed himself while he was in a cemetery, and he is not befitting yet to do it, so he must leave the cemetery immediately. If he's not leaving, he is in violation of you should not delay. The Rabbi Akiva have a problem with that, because he said you should not delay applied on an offering, sacrificial offering. How do you compare something that depends upon the temple services to this? Temple service is what we said. If you commit yourself to give an offering, and it's now festival of Passover, you are in violation only when the year passes, which means the following Passover. And you compare that to a Nazirite who was standing there at the cemetery, and you tell me if he's not doing that right away, he is in violation of thou shalt not delay. So he said, how you compare the two? So Rabbi Akiva left it, tzarich iyun. I need to delve deeply, but in Chilushei Agranat, he tried to say that the concept, it's not, you not juxtapose the event itself. The concept is the same concept. Since we said in a previous discussion that you compare Neder to Nazir in Bal Yachel, Bal Te'achel, so you can compare the two also in a case of cemetery. So therefore, we go to the next step, which is Gemarrah in Tractate Nazir, page 16b, have a disputation between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, his brother-in-law. What's the disputation? They said here...
I have a question.
Yes.
And Neder, if you consecrate property,
okay,
or you make a vow to consecrate property, is that a Neder?
It's for sure. For example, if I said this car is going to TI, right, or TA.
I'm talking specifically consecration. That's still considered a Neder.
So you basically...
No, the reason I'm asking is because, I mean, essentially, Nazir is in a way, I mean, you're consecrating yourself. So
what do we said in the introduction?
Yeah.
Let's refresh our memory. Right. We said that there are two concepts. One is called Hefza, and one is called Gavra. Hefza is the Coca-Cola.
Yeah, right.
Gavra is upon yourself.
Right.
Okay? Anyway, so over there in Tractate Nazir, page 16b, we learned the disputation between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. What's the disputation? Someone who committed himself to be Nazir, while he is in a cemetery, if that count in those days that he is Nazirite, and if he needs to bring a special offering for that, so Rabbi Yochanan said that he is immediately, the moment it's come out of his mouth, boom, he is Nazir. Right? So he said it apply immediately. He cannot drink wine, he cannot shave, even he's in a cemetery. And if he did that, for example, if he drank wine or shave, he deserved malkot. But Reish Lakish said, no, since he is in a state of ritual impurity, he rendering ritual impurity, because he's physically in a cemetery. So you cannot tell me that at that moment he become Nazirite. Therefore, he said, he needs to get out of the cemetery. He needs to purify himself. Then he counting the day of Nazirite, and then and only then he is in all rules and regulations, the Ran said, of Nazirite. So it means the disputation is, if he deserves Malkot, when he's there. Both said that he become a Nazir. The only question is, when exactly it's applied to him. This will be well according to the one who said, Lo chayla alei nezirut me'altar, which means, he said, the act rendering matter of Nazirite will not apply retroactively, meaning immediately, because what Reish Lakish tells us, that you need to be out of the cemetery, you need to be purified, and then and only then you can be a Nazirite. So it means if he's delayed from doing that, delayed his purification, then he is in a violation of you shall not delay, the Ran said. Ela leman de amar me'altar chaylalei. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, that tells us that matter of Nazirut applies immediately, even he is still in a cemetery. Mi ika bal te'acher. You mean to say that the violation of thou shall not delay applies? It's already in effect on him the moment it's uttered out of his mouth. So he does not need to reapply or restate it, his manner of acceptance of Nazirut when he is in a state of purity. So, what exactly the concept of thou shall not delay applies there, the Ran asks. So the Gemara add and said, Ve'od ha'amar mar bar Ashi, that's in Tractate Nazir, page 17, Chayla nezirut alei me'altar. He said that everyone agrees. Who is everyone? Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, right? They both agreed that the matter of Nazirite applies to him immediately when he uttered this word. The only idea is, Vechi plige, the disputation between the two is, Le'inyan malkot plige. So Reish Lakish said, only if he did something in violation, such as drinking wine, shave, when he's out of the cemetery, then he deserves the punishment of malkot, meaning lashes. But if he's in a cemetery, no. Versus Rabbi Yochanan said, no. Even he's in a cemetery, at that very moment, he is in violation. He deserves malkot immediately. So since, if you tell me by both views, which is Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, that this applies when he is physically at the cemetery, so what the connection between this and the Torah commandment, thou shalt not delay? What delay applies here? So here you see a disputation between the Ran and the Meiri and the Rosh. Ran said, delay, meaning ichur, afilu lezman muat, even for short period of time. It's immediately. The Meiri said, zman mesuyam, kmo yom acher, which means it has to be a certain time, for example, a different day, meaning he changed all around the structure of his commitment. So the Gemara responded.
So Reish Lakish is saying that essentially the vow doesn't take effect until he walks out of the cemetery.
No, Reish Lakish said that the vow take effect immediately, but as far as the malkot punishment,
so just the punishment, he's not liable to punishment for anything that he does while he's in the graveyard.
Excellent, good.
But why? I mean, why?
Because he's in a cemetery.
Well, I mean, I understand, but if he's still if the vow takes effect and he still purposely does something.
That's what Rabbi Yochanan challenged.
I understand if he's.
That's the argument.
I understand he's not going to get malkot for being in the cemetery.
Beautiful.
But
that's the argument.
Else he does.
Beautiful. That's the argument.
All right.
You say what Rabbi Yochanan said. Why you think that way?
I'm trying to understand Reish Lakish. That's why
no.
I'm trying to
Reish Lakish said, look, we understand his commitment, but since he's physically, whatever the reason is, he's still there, you cannot impose malkot punishment on him right away. Because whatever the reason is that he's still in a cemetery, let him leave the cemetery. Now if you do something, then you impose malkot on him. Right?
I mean, I understand that's what you're saying. I just don't see the.
So you agree with Rabbi Yochanan?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, the idea is, the logic is this. Both agreed that the matter of utterness of Nezirut applied immediately.
Right.
Chalot Nezirut happened immediately. The only question is imposing punishment of lashes, of malkot, for violation of something that you utter. Can you impose upon someone just because he will not stay at the cemetery forever, right? He walk out of the cemetery sooner or later. So
Reish Lakish would hold the same thing if, for example, he was in a house or a tent with a corpse. Would be the same thing if he just so he was Talmud do the corpse and then he made a nazir, a neder.
So imposing malkot, you're asking about the corpse.
The difference is now he's in a house he's tamei from being, from being, or
Yes, but the idea of
supposed to.
imposing malkot,
Right.
it's a punishment.
The same.
Yeah.
The same in that.
You have to have to change the status. If I understand correctly, Reish Lakish, I think, Reish Lakish said, since we have to connect the intent with the action, I assume the person know enough that you cannot be Nazir while you are in a cemetery, and therefore your intent was to impose upon yourself the Nazirut, the structure, the regular Nazirut for 30 days, when you are out of state of rendering ritual impurity. So therefore you cannot impose punishment if the intent was not immediate. The intent applies to something that will happen soon. Anyway, afilu achei,
All right, I see.
afilu achei kam lei beval te'acher. So the Gemara said, even though the manner of Nezirut applies immediately, the violation of negative commandment, thou shall not delay, applies. Mikshum dekam me'acher Nezirut de tahara, because he delayed the ritual purification of Nazirite. Meaning, the application has to be when he's pure from attaching to a corpse, which is a ritual impurity. Amar Rav Ashi, we derive from that, Ho'il vechen, since the violation of thou shall not delay even after the application of Nazirite, so Nazir shetimeh atzmo b'mezid, if a Nazirite make himself ritually impure with that intent, over mishum bal te'acher, he is in a violation of thou shall not delay, din zirut tahara, because the Nazirship of ritual impurity, as he thereby prevents himself for completing his Nazirship in a state of ritual impurity on time. So the rabbis ask a question, the Tosfot and others, why use the word b'mezid intentionally? So they try to say that if someone become a Nazir, and then he become ritually impure, and then he commit himself again for Nazirite, so if it was shogeg, if it was unintentional, he doesn't deserve malkot. That's called shev ve'al ta'aseh, and not necessarily in a cemetery, but one of the Khatam Sofer responsa dealing if someone said, he's 20 years old man, and he said, 30 days before I'll pass, I'll be a Nazirite. So you don't know when it happens, so he has to be Nazirite immediately, right? Now you reach the age of 100, should he continue that? The answer is yes. Why? Because you never know when he is, when he will be gone. Famous Khatam Sofer. Another explanation how the violation of thou shall not delay apply to Nazirite. Rav Acha Breder Rav Ika Amar over beval te'acher tiglachto. You shall not delay with regard with shaving. Meaning, if he delayed when he completed the term of Nazirite. In general, when Nazirite completed his term, he needs to bring 3 offerings. Olah, burn offering, Chatat, sin offering, Shlamim, peace offering. So, and then, part of the ritual, the Torah said he needs to shave his hair and burn his hair in fire, that combining with the place that the peace offering on the old, that's the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 13 to 20. So Nazirite that delayed his shaving even for short time, he is right away in violation, the Ran said, of thou shall not delay. The Tosfot said, even Nazirite that completed his days with ritual impurity is in violation. So since this Nazirite depend upon the service in the temple, which means lechatchila, the first place, he should do this manner of shaving while he is in a temple in the women's section, and then he needs to take his hair and that combined with the peace offering and burn. So the idea is he cannot delay that for the 3 festivals. He needs to do it immediately. Anyway, ולא מבעיה למאן דאמר תגלחת מעכבת, that this is not an issue to one who hold that shaving is indispensable for a Nazirite and is subject to all the prohibition of a Nazirite until he shaves. So the Torah said over there in the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 21, ve'achar, and then yishteh hanazir yain. Then the Nazirite should go ahead and drink wine. So it means when he finished all these rituals, is a Tanaic disputation in Tractate Nazir, page 46, what exactly ve'achar? Rabbi Elazar said, so regardless, meaning offering, shaving, so all of that delayed from his release from Nazirite's laws. The majority of the saviors said no, even he did one of the thing that applies to release. For example, he brought the offering, then he's already released, the Ran said, from all this Nazir prohibition. So there is a book called Ayelet HaShachar. He explains that the idea of not just shaving, the whole idea of Nazirite applies to a lot of components, which is wine, shaving, touching to deceased, etc. So he said the idea of shaving is part of the concept of Nazirite. So therefore he is in violation when it's Bal Te'acher, when he is delaying. The Yerushalmi ask a question. Trace a situation that someone has a baby boy, and the Torah tells us, you remember book of Leviticus, parsha Tazria, remember that? Ubayom Hashmini, or the 8 days, Yimol Besar Olato, the obligation upon the father is to do the Brit Milah of his son exactly at the 8 days. If not because of hepatitis infections or other things, or yellowness, it's just the father delayed the bris, right? He didn't perform it at the 8 days, so he is in violation, right? So the idea is, when you use the term Bal Te'acher, you shall not delay. Why it's not applied in the Brit Milah? So they explain, because the Torah, when it's used the term Bal Te'acher with the offering, the Torah used the word leshalmo, meaning to pay. So the Yerushalmi said something that you cannot pay later, because the moment the 8 day passed, it's over. You cannot bring back the 8 days. So therefore, Bal Te'acher, you shall not delay, it's not apply here. So the Or Sameach asked a question on that Yerushalmi, and the Or Sameach asked, if you specified in a matter of Nedarim, making a vow, we understand that. But he said, when it's come to Brit Milah, to the circumcision, it's not, all the idea of Bal Te'acher, it's not applicable. So he said, the whole idea is Kabbalat Nezirut, when someone accepts upon himself the manner of Nazirite. For example, if he's delay shaving, he is in violation of בל תאחר. And that's based on איילת השחר. It's because it's חלק ממצוות נזירות. It's part of the mitzvah of Nazirite. אלא אפילו למאן דאמר. Even the one who said תגלחת אינה מעכבת, which means shaving, it's not a reason to be in violation of בל תאחר, מצוות גילוח מיהה לא מקיים, but he does not fulfill the mitzvah of shaving until he actually shaves. So what we understand, that if he delays, he violates the prohibition against delaying. So Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh, add to that something very interesting. You know, every morning we have the korbanos, the offering, and if you look at the prayer books, there's the Yehi Ratzon. May it will be that if I deserve to be punished and bring the sin offering, this statement should be a substitute. So the Rosh have a problem with that. He said, no, you should not say it, because if you're not sure about it, don't say it. But here's one opinion. Anyway.
What is the chatat offering for when the Nazir? I know we're not in.
No, one of the three.
When it ends, they have to bring a chatat. Why?
Because okay. In general, the Torah said the person should be very careful not to utter something out of his mouth.
So it's
period.
So it's a vow. The fact that
even just that.
That was
the idea is the only time we say that we encourage any matter of vows, it's if you commit yourself. I want to encourage myself to study Torah, so I commit myself to study another half an hour a day, and you make a matter of vows. That's something that we encourage you.
Right.
לעולם אל תהיה רגיל בנדרים. We don't want that. We don't want this type of commitment. It's one of those things that we try to avoid because we take your word is your honor. So they said, מר זוטרא ברי דרב מרי אמר, עובר בבל תאחר קורבנותיו. He said, a Nazir is in violation, the sins, the commandment that you shall not delay in regard to his offering, if he postponing bringing his offering. Umin acha nafkale. So if from here the juxtaposition between Nezirut to Neder, you learn the idea of you shall not delay an offering. Mehatam nafkale. You learn it from other verse. Why? Because the Torah said, Ki darosh yidreshenu. The Torah said in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verse 22, that God is demanded. What does that mean, God demanded? So they said, Eilu chataot ve'ashamot. That's applied to a sin offering and the guilt offering, which means that a person has the obligation to bring them and not to delay them. So that's also the offering, the obligatory offering, korbanot chova of Nazir. So since you can derive from that why you need to have this verbal juxtaposition between Nezirut and Nedarim, to teach us that when it's come to offering, you are in violation of thou shall not delay. Ma'u detema chidushu shechidsha Torah benazir. You may think that this is something innovating, that in a law that the Torah innovated in regards to Nazir, so therefore the prohibition against delays does not apply here. And you cannot incorporate it with Kidarosh Idreshenu. My Chidush, what type of innovation is here when it's come to Nazirite? Ilema delo matpis lei lechatat Nazir beneder. You may say that he cannot accept upon himself the sin offering of Nazirite to a vow, meaning if one who is not Nazir He said, I committed myself to bring a sin offering of Nazir. His vow has no validity. Why? Because it's not applicable. Because just general, stam neder, stam nedava, just general statement, it's only when you accept the idea of Nezirut with incorporated all the dinim, everything together. That's the Ran said. So they said, Harei chelev, chatat chelev. The Torah prohibited us to eat fat of animal. So that's a typical sin offering that one brings when he inadvertently violates certain prohibition, one of which is this one, she'ein matpisa beneder. So the Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh, said that that's matsui, that's something that's more common, that the person, she'adam yikashel bechelev, that the person stumble in this idea of eating fat. Ve'over beval te'acher, and he is in violation of you shall not delay, because he needs to bring the sin offering, and if he passed the 3 festivals from that commitment, he is in violation. So why you need to learn this verbal juxtaposition that the person is in violation of thou shall not delay when it's come to sin offering of Nezirite? Ela mai chidushei. What's the novelty? What's the innovative point of Nezirite? Sal kadata chamina. You may come to your mind. Ho'il v'imamar hareini nazir. If he said, I hereby a nazir, afilu min chartzan, even from a grape seed, have a nazir lakol, so he is already have all the restriction of Nazirite. Eima lo la'avor alei mishum bal te'acher. You might say that if he postpones his offering, he should not transgress the commandment not to delay. Kamash melan. So therefore the verbal juxtaposition of the offering of the Nazir teach us that yes, you do have the violation of thou shall not delay. So the same idea of Nedarim applies to Nazir, that you have the violation of you shall not delay. So we mentioned earlier the Reb Shlomo Zalman, my teacher, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He asked a question indirectly, it's connected. He said, if someone borrow money from Hebrew free loan, you remember that? Someone borrow money from Hebrew free loan, 10K. He needs to pay medical expenses. He borrowed and he's at due dates. He passed the due dates. So the Gemarrah start pushing him. The Hebrew free loan, the people in charge, start pushing him to return the money. So they ask Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach if they are in a violation of the Torah said, Lo tiyeh lo kenoshe. When you have a lender and borrower, you cannot be a creditor that pushing the guy. Now, Reb Shlomo Zalman said, no, don't compare it. He said, Gemarrah, Hebrew free loan is like a charity fund. It's the same as the charity fund that you borrow money, it's like you borrow money from a charity fund. So the same way as a neder, you commit yourself to return, and if you are not return, you are in violation of Bal Te'acher, you shall not delay. So therefore, a pressure of the one who in charge for the Hebrew free loan, it's okay. You know why? Because he tried to avoiding you from being in violation of Bal Te'acher, you shall not delay. So it's not relevant, the whole law of lender and borrower. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said, Hanicha leman de'amar. We understand clearly for one who said, Ki nazir min chartzan, have nazir lakol. If someone committed himself to be a Nazirite, for what? For a small grape, like chartzan, grape seed, he is automatically Nazir for all the Nazirite restrictions. Meaning, in the Tractate Nazir there is a disputation if partially commitment of Nazirite, it's applied to entirely manner of Nazirite or not. Ela li Rabbi Shimon de Amar, אין נזיר עד שיזיר מכולם, which means the moment he said general, הריני נזיר, the Rosh said general Nazir, he is already without going specification, but if he goes and he said Areni Nazir, the Rosh said, wait a second, he needs to be specified all the rules of Nazir. There's something that come out of the grave, the shaving, touching the corpse, etc. That's the Rosh in Tractate Nazir, page 3b. So he said, my ika lemeimar. So what's we have to say, since Nazirut is no difference than any other obligation when it's come to Neder, so why you have a difference in the commandment, you shall not delay, ve'od, and furthermore, hay chidush lechumrahu, this innovating law that applied to Nazirite is more stringencies than all the others. Ela my chidushei, and what's the real novel law of Nazir? That because of that you enter to your mind that it's not bal te'acher, it's not delay with the offering if you do not compare Nazir to Neder, the salka data chamina, that you may think ho'il, that since the law 4b ve'im gilach al achat mishloshtan, that if he shaves upon bringing one of the three offerings, which is sin offering, burnt offering, and peace offering, that he is obligated to bring, Yatsa, he fulfills his obligation of shaving, and he allows to drink wine and other rules. That's based on Mishnah and Tractate Nazir, page 45. Lo ya'avor alei beval te'acher, he will not be in violation of you shall not delay. Kamash melan, therefore you have this verbal juxtaposition to teach us that he is in a violation of his offering of you shall not delay, the Ran said. Another option, ve'iba'it eima, my chidushei, that we, without this verbal juxtaposition, we do not know the idea of the bal te'acher shall not delay, mishum delo matpiso beneder, but because the offering of a Nazir cannot be accepted through a vow. The question we ask about the fat, Chatat chelev ka'atya lekapara, this is to atone for something that happened unintentionally, deserve karet. So since it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment to bring it in order to atone, so if he is in delay, he is in violation. Chatat nazir lemay atya, why, when it's come to sin offering of Nazir, so what does the sin offering of a Nazirite come? Since it does not come to atone for sin, one might have thought that the prohibition against delaying does not apply. So the Gemara said, V'arei chatat yoledet, the lo atya lechapara, when the woman that give birth, she bringing a sin offering, it's not come to effect commandment, to atone. V'avar alea mishum bal te'acher, but if she is delayed, she is in violation. The Torah said in Leviticus 12 that even she did not commit any sin, she needs to bring that offering. If she delays, she's in violation. They should not delay. For example, Rabbi Shimon said in Tractate Nedarim, page 31b, that during the delivery she may scream or said, "I'll never have relation with my husband." Right? So therefore, she needs to bring an offering for that. Even though the essence of that offering is not because because if she knows clearly that she was in a different state of mind, she still needs to bring that offering. and even she didn't say that's the general concept. She needs to bring an offering for all kind of situations during the. So they said, even that it's not come for atonement, it's still, if she delay it from bringing after she delivered the child, she's in violation of the you shall not delay. So they said, "Ai kashar yalea lemeichal bekodashim." This sin offering renders the woman who is giving birth that she can eat from a consecrated item, which means that's a mitzvah, because a woman needs to bring once a year a paschal offering and eat from that meat. So she needs to eat there. Now we go back to our discussion, page 3, that when it's come to Nedarim, the father can abrogate it, Nidrei bito, Bal mefer nidrei ishto, and a husband can revoke his wife's Neder. Af Nezirut, the same apply to Nezirut. Ha'av mefer Nezirut bito, Val mefer Nezirut ishto, the father can revoke his daughter's Nezirut, and the same a husband can revoke his wife's Nezirut. Lama liye keisha, so why you need the verbal juxtaposition as a source for these rules? Teite b'ma matzinu nedarim, you derive through ma matzinu that even without verbal juxtaposition from Nedarim. Dilma, so the Gemara responded and said, Gabei Nedarim udemei fer mishum delo itlei mishum ketzuta. When it's come to Nedarim, it's different because an unspecified Neder does not have a time limit. Aval Gabei Nezirut deit ketzuta, because when it's come to Nezirut, you have a very clear time frame. Distam Nezirut 30 yom. We said that the Gemara in Nazir, page 5, said that if a general statement of I become a Nazirite applies to 30 days, so they say Eimalo, so may you say that there is no way to revoke it. Kamash Melan, so therefore you learn from this verbal juxtaposition that even when it's come to a vow of Nazir, you do have a concept of revoking those commitments. The Mishnah teaches, Haomer lechavero, if someone said to his fellow, Mudar ani, I'm vowed from you, or another intimation of a vow, that the vow takes effect. So over there, so Gemara elaborates and said, Amar Shmuel, the Shmuel said, Bechulan, all these language of vow, Ad Shiyomar, it's not in effect until he says, She'ani ochelecha, I am a vow from you with regard to which I eat of yours. She'ani to'em lecha, that I taste of you. So in this specification, I am a vow from you is not considering even some form of intimation of a vow. If you said to someone, I am vow from you, I am separate from you, I am a distance from you, you just use the yadot nedarim, you use a language of handler of a neder. Shani ochel lecha, שאני תואם לך, הרי זה אסור. והאח יקטן באמת דברים רואים, ואומר שאני אוכל לך, שאני תואם לך. והתניא איפכה, but we learn the opposite way in a Braita, שאני אוכל לך, שאני תואם לך, that which I eat, I taste. So אסור, so therefore it's prohibited by the term of his neder. מודרני ממך, I am vow from you, מופרשני ממך, ומופרשני ממך, I am separate from you, מרוחקני ממך, I am a distance from you, הרי זה אסור. He is forbidden by this term of neder. So how do you explain this Braita? It means each one of them is prohibited, unlike the Shmuel's view. Tnei hache, you should learn as follows. Uchvar amar mudrani. He's already previously said, I am vowed from you. So the Gemara said, Yache ainu reisha, asur ve'od asur asur, lama li lemitnei. The idea that he said twice, I'm prohibited, why the Tana needs to repeat. If the last clause explained the first, the reisha, you don't need to repeat the word asur, prohibited, in the last part. So the Gemara said in different avenue, Amar Shmuel Tama de Amar Shani Ochel Lecha Shani Tohem Lecha. The reason he used the language I eat from you, I taste from you. Who de asur v'chavero mutar, which means he is prohibited by the neder to derive benefit from his fellow, but his fellow is permitted to derive benefit from him. Page 5, Aval Amar Mudrani Heimach Lechudei Shnehem Asurim. But if he said, I am avowed from you, they are both prohibited from deriving benefit from one another. Ki hada Amar Rabbi Yosef beRabbi Chanina Mudrani Heimach Shnehen Asurim. That's the way Rabbi Yossi, son of Chanina, said. If one said, I'm avowed from you, they are both prohibited. So, applies in both ways. So, I would like to conclude with a famous Shvut Yaakov. Shvut Yaakov is one of the luminary rabbis. He asked a question following this discussion. If it's a Rosh Hashanah, someone is very sick in his house, and you get a group that come and daven by him. So they're praying and everything, and they blow the shofar. Now, if he's sick, right, by halacha, he can go and eat, right? But the guy is very observant, and he's not comfortable with that. So they didn't daven Musaf yet, right? So he said, I am taking a vow that I'm not going to eat until everyone leaves. Now what happened? They finished Musaf, and someone come up and give a drasha, and giving a speech, right? So the question is, can he is now allowed to go and eat or not? So he said, in general, he needs to have a Tractate Nedarim, annulment of his vow. Why? Because people still not leave. Even he meant to say that when they finish the prayer, they finish davening, but since people did not left yet, so it's a problem. So you see from here that it's all depend upon your expression, what exactly you say and how you say it. You remember on Yom Kippur, the first thing we do before we daven, we say Kol Nidre. Because we have to have this annulment, we take very seriously every statement that utter from one's mouth.
Shuloim alachai shuloim malachai